So recently, I was told to watch The Accountant, a movie starring Ben Affleck, released in 2016 by Warner Brothers Pictures. I was told to watch this as it is a pretty popular movie that actually does happen to feature an autistic protagonist. Folks were curious to hear my thoughts on whether this is actually a good autistic portrayal or not, and after having seen The Accountant, I can very comfortably say this is not a good portrayal at all. And that is something I want to discuss today, but however, I think this issue is much greater than just The Accountant itself, and this actually leans into a stereotype that a lot of other movies and shows often use, especially if it's a film about an autistic character. Of course, I'm talking about the Savant Trope in film and television. This is a trope often given to autistic and autistic coded characters where they're much smarter than every other character in the film or TV show, and they can somehow solve problems magically with their knowledge or autism superpowers typically. As a result, they can often come off as more of a machine than a real person, and sometimes they are a machine, which we'll talk about later in this video. I want to take this video to discuss why that savant stereotype is bad and why it shouldn't be used anymore by Hollywood, and what kind of portrayals Hollywood should try to focus on instead for a more diversified experience with representation. I'll be talking about a few different movies and shows here in addition to The Accountant, but let's start with The Accountant first, since in all honesty this movie has many issues right from the get-go. For those who may not know, The Accountant is a action thriller movie from 2016 that stars Anna Kendrick and Ben Affleck as the accountant himself. The idea here is that a young autistic savant boy grows up and is taught by his dad to be a lethally trained killer and put a stop to anybody that might fear him or think that he's different. He is also incredibly gifted as a mathematician, which ends up getting him the role as an accountant to begin with. However, he also secretly works as a gun for hire and a money launderer, given his profound gift with combat and mathematicianing. And of course, all the money that he makes by being a hitman and a money launderer goes right back into an institution for autistic children that is very likely run by Autism Speaks, given how dreadful everything here looks. On the surface, this film might seem like just another harmless, typical run-the-mill action shooter type movie, but in actuality, it is actually spreading a ton of harmful stereotypes about autism. The way Ben Affleck portrays his autistic character often just comes off as super robotic and not really human feeling at all. Much like all these other autistic savant characters, he is gifted with an unnatural ability to solve any math problem on a whim, and do impressively complex calculations on a dime, which is exactly why every single criminal organization out there has him as their accountant. Weirdly enough, this movie actually does have a pretty strong following, and it was popular enough when it came out to warrant a sequel coming out pretty soon as well, apparently. But it really does fall into all the same traps that literally every other savant-based autistic media falls into. The main character played by Ben Affleck is just so hard to really get behind or resonate with because he's not really a real person at all. He's not really that interesting from a character development perspective because honestly he's not really that well developed. Instead, the movie seems to be content just to latch onto his autistic savant qualities that it presents him with and just focus on that and not really make him a real character at all. As a result, he just comes off as more like an object or a robot, if anything. And Anna Kendrick's character in this movie is more like a vessel for the audience to try and see him through, which still doesn't work, obviously. This is similar to how in Steins Gate, Kirisu is like the vessel character for the audience there, who is supposed to be looking at the lab and trying to make sense of what Okabe, Daru, Mayuri, and all the other members are trying to do. However, that actually works because Kirisu is well fleshed out enough to be a real character, and honestly, Okabe is too, and every other single member of the lab. Kirisu slowly gets to learn about each member and slowly gets attached to each and every person there. Here, Anna Kendrick's character can't really do that because Ben Affleck just isn't really a character here. And he also ends up leaving her anyway, so we don't even get to understand anything about him through her. I will say, out of all the other savant-based media that I've talked about and covered on this channel, and just viewed in general, this probably is the best one, since it was the least aggravating to watch. It does have some surprisingly solid action sequences and some pretty interesting elements overall that I won't spoil here, but the thing that really does kill this movie for me is the fact how stereotypical Ben Affleck's autistic character is played. Obviously, of course, The Accountant is not the only major Hollywood production that has pretty blatant, awful savant stereotypes in it. Another pretty notable example that I've discussed a little bit here on the channel before in its own dedicated video is Disney and ABC ABC's The Good Doctor TV show. Like I said, I had done a whole video talking about what makes this show itself bad and how Disney definitely messed up by teaming up with Autism Speaks to make this show, which we'll talk about that more in a bit here. But specifically here, I want to talk about why its autistic savant character, Sean Murphy, is really one of the worst autistic representations ever, and why the savant thing is really bad on him especially. As discussed in my Good Doctor video, Sean's autism somehow gives him the ability to magically figure out any solution to any medical problem by using his autism superpowers. Whoopee. Once again, this sort of makes Sean come off as more of a machine than really a person at all, and even walks around like a robot oftentimes throughout the show overall. On top of this, even outside of the absurd savant abilities that Sean has in this TV show, which honestly are a pretty big reach to begin with anyway, he is also pretty blatantly infantilized, with the intro to the first episode of the show even talking about how his mind is like that of a child, but he's gifted with amazing savant abilities and medical knowledge. And of course, this causes all his peers in the hospital, and even his own girlfriend, to treat him like some kind of pet or baby, which is gross. This show did not really do the autistic community any favors at all, and again, just like The Accountant, showed a major lack of understanding of what autism really is and what it really looks like overall in people. As was mentioned before, Disney worked very heavily with Autism Speaks in order to get this show out there and try to find a portrayal of autism they wanted for this show, so that they could air it on ABC and pull in big numbers. Which, as sad as it is, to their credit, they did. This show ran for 7 seasons and was a big success. However, something I find very interesting here is actually The Accountant also did this, funnily enough. Not many people realize this, but Warner Brothers actually worked with Autism Speaks in order to get The Accountant out there too, which in turn explains all the textbook stereotypical things that this movie portrays. They really did make the same exact mistake that Disney and ABC made. This is honestly why an organization like Autism Speaks is honestly really terrible, for a lot of reasons obviously, not just the fact that they team up with media companies to make movies and shows like this, but also the fact they perform abusive ABA therapy on autistic children, which is meant to cure them of their autism and restrain them from stimulating themselves. Which obviously is A, wrong, and B, can cause major psychological damage to a child for no reason. If anything, it just feels like these shows and movies are the product of Autism Speaks choosing to team up with major companies like Disney or Warner Brothers in order to get their own twisted idea of what autism is out there to mass audiences. The same thing happened with Fox and The Predator before Fox was bought by Disney too. Which, of course, I talked about The Predator in another video. That movie is just as bad as The Good Doctor and The Accountant, and maybe even worse. Ultimately, these autistic savant characters come off as autistic stereotypes made by people that don't really know any better about what autism really is. And it ultimately does perpetuate a lot of misgivings about autism overall. However, I do think there is a solution to this, that being a trope that I want to call smart yet flawed, which is thankfully becoming a more common way to portray autistic coded characters and explicitly stated autistic characters in media, and I personally view as the antidote to the Savant Trope. To give a very good example of a smart yet flawed character, I want to bring up Milo Thatch from Disney's Atlantis. A lot of people like Milo as an autistic coded character, myself included. Out of every single male Disney protagonist, Milo is perhaps the biggest underdog out of them all. He's not a demigod, he doesn't have any magical powers, and he doesn't really have any combat training at all. He's just relying on his smarts and knowledge of the civilization that he and these other people are investigating. And along the way, he's very eager to tell them all about it and also try to help them with various problems that they face along the way. Like when their main engine breaks down, he's actually the one who ends up fixing it. While they all just kind of make fun of him at the start of the expedition and sort of ostracize him, they slowly grow to appreciate the kind of person he is and his hyperfixation on Atlantis and technology overall, since it does save them many a time. However, the thing is, with how this is portrayed, this isn't really shown in a savant way. He's not fixing their engine through magical autism superpowers or whatever, he's just doing it through his very natural and very genuine hyperfixation on technology and Atlantis. In something like Disney's Atlantis, it comes off as much more genuine and human than in something like The Good Doctor, which is ironic given both are Disney. Yet somehow Atlantis manages to make a much more believable and easy to root for autistic character, even though Milo himself isn't actually stated to be autistic throughout the entirety of the movie. But at the end of the day, I'd much rather have a character like Milo representing the autistic community rather than someone like Sean Murphy or Ben Affleck in The Accountant. Milo and a lot of other autistic coded characters like this just come off as so much more genuine than somebody like Sean Murphy or an awful Savant character like that. I think it's really something a lot of writers in Hollywood need to study, looking at these autistic coded characters more and learning from that how to be able to write a real autistic character. Or even better, just hire autistic writers, since we actually know how to do that kind of thing. I really do hope we see more autistic writers hired in Hollywood overall, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who will know how to write a character like this accurately. I really do hope that's something that happens more. I think shows like Carl the Collector and a few other shows that are actually incorporating autistic writing teams are definitely making a pretty good mark, and a solid template that hopefully movies and television will use in the future when making shows like this. It's really important and it puts out real awareness, unlike something like Autism Speaks. But at the end of the day, that's just my take on it. What do you think of all this? Let me know below what you think of the savant trope in media. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Am I horribly wrong about all this? Let me know in the comments below. I love talking about film tropes overall, so leave your suggestions for other tropes you'd like me to discuss in film in the comments below too. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you didn't like it, give it a like anyway. If you want to check out all my socials down below, you can see all those down there. And if you want to join my Discord too, where you can communicate with me and others offline, that should be linked down below. And if you want to check out my Letterboxd, that is linked down below as well. That's where I review movies, oftentimes movies or shows I won't review here on YouTube. So you can check that out too if you want extra content from me. But for now, I've been Noah the Otter, and I'll see you on the Otter side. Bye!